Welcome, everyone, to another episode of CPAC Live. We have a couple of great guests today. Ian Smith's going to join us, the owner of this gym in New Jersey that's been terrorized by his own governor and the government of New Jersey. The people of New Jersey generally are being terrorized and having their freedoms threatened and taken away by a governor who views an outbreak of a virus as a time to get awfully political. We're also going to be joined by a great conservative congressman from Wisconsin, Mike Gallagher, who's going to be joining us at CPAC Wisconsin, which is August 14th. We're going to be in Green Bay, and we want you all to come. You can come from wherever in this great country you want to come from, because we all want to get out and see each other. Go to our website at conservative.org to get the information about who's going to be speaking and about signing up, but we want to see you. And I'm sure you're going to have the ability to also watch it streaming as well, and I'm sure we're going to have content that will be available on CPAC Live. But go to our website at conservative.org, August 14th, Green Bay, Wisconsin, CPAC, Wisconsin, Governor Scott Walker, Lieutenant Governor Clayfish, Mike Gallagher, as I said, our guest on today's show, is going to be with us, and many, many, many others, including myself and my wonderful wife, Mercedes, and many other people that are usually in our traveling road show to try to save the country in 90 days. And so our first guest today is Ian Smith. Ian, you are a real American hero, not because you did anything extraordinary, because you had the audacity to do something ordinary, which is put an open sign on your business. Tell us the status of what's going on with your gym in Jersey.
So I am one of the co-owners of Untitled Gym in Belmar, New Jersey, just outside of Philadelphia, right over the river. My partner and I, Frank Trabetti, about a month and a half into the shutdown, which, if we all remember, Governor Murphy and most of the governors asked for 14 days. About a month and a half into that 14 days, we had had enough, and we had had enough with the lack of assistance and the lack of guidance coming from our governor. And we were growing very, very tired of this sit down, shut up and wait sort of dictation coming from government. So we started to put together a comprehensive safety plan in order to open not only our business, but we put forth the plan so that it could apply to any business to operate safely in regards to public health, even during a health crisis. So we put that plan out publicly, and it got local attention, and then it got national media attention, and I wound up going on Tucker Carlson. And Murphy knew what was going to happen. It was very clear that we were going to open, and nobody ever reached out to us. And that was kind of the plan from the beginning, is that we were going to show this plan to the world, and in the hopes that government would reach out and want to work with the people instead of just tell them what to do.
We've been traveling to different states, and it seems like different people have a different approach. In New Jersey, near Philly, where your gym is, do you find that you're an unusual case of taking on the governor and opening up your business, or so are you unique, or are there others who are saying, yeah, we can open up safely and responsibly and service our customers, or are you a unique person?
There are many who share the same sentiment, that they are unhappy with the way that we are being governed. But there are not many who are willing to put everything on the line and open up. There was a diner, and there still is in Lakeside Diner in New Jersey. He's been open. He opened right after we did. There's been a couple other businesses. There was a movie theater, and they were all heavily, heavily punished. The movie theater wound up shutting down. So there's certainly a lot of people who share it in terms of the frustration, but there's not a lot of people who can step up or who are willing to step up for various reasons. So we opened on May 18th, and we opened with a very large crowd outside and a line of supporters wrapped around the building. That week came and went very quickly. That Monday, we were handed citations. The Belmar police initially wanted nothing to do with it, but Governor Murphy forced their hand and threatened to furlough the entire department if they did not act on the situation. So they wound up giving us citations that day. we kept operating. Tuesday, we reopened as planned. We were given more citations. They then began to weaponize the Belmar police against our members, and they were citing our members for leaving the gym. That continued into Wednesday. Wednesday, they set up cameras in the parking lot, and because of the bad optics, I guess it was, arresting and citing members, they were following people out of the parking lot and pulling them over down the street and handing them tickets out of the eyes of the media. And then Wednesday night, in the middle of the night, Governor Murphy chose to weaponize the health department against us. Somebody came in the middle of the night and slapped a sticker on the door that was a notice of embargo from the health department that was basically, you are shut down because coronavirus, with nobody ever stepping foot inside the building or anything like that. It was, we've had no contact with anybody whatsoever, and we were just shut down arbitrarily. We continued to reopen on Thursday and Friday, and eventually on Friday, Governor Murphy got a court order from Judge Robert Luggie, who is a previous attorney general in the state of New Jersey, and they had our locks physically changed.
Ian, as you noticed, you said the cops didn't seem to really have their heart in this, because there's obviously crime, serious crime going on around this country and things for cops to focus on, and cops have never been so undermined as they are in our society today. Do you think there's a natural affinity between the thin blue line and those small business people who are trying to open up safely? Do you feel like there's a lot of camaraderie?
I think that there is. I think that there is in a lot of ways. You know, first of all, we are a very local establishment. Upwards of 25% or more of our members are law enforcement, family of law enforcement, first responders of some kind, active or veteran military, and we're a very local establishment. Most of the Belmar police work out in our facility, so we knew for a fact that they wanted absolutely nothing to do with it. They said it themselves, and their actions were pretty clear that there was very little enthusiasm in what they were doing. They did not really want to be there. But I do think there's some camaraderie with the way that the police have been villainized as a political sort of ploy in this election season, and it also kind of seems like small businesses are villainized as well. You know, you have these governors talking about how they need to stop the spread or slow the spread, and small businesses are responsible. And the reality is that small businesses aren't responsible for the spread, and the reality is that the demonization of the police department is just as false and as untrue, and as, I think, really sort of wrong on every level. These small businesses should not be demonized. Police should not be demonized. These are all good people who share good, hearty American values of hard work, protecting your community, loving your community, and wanting to support your community.
So when we read that New Jersey has shut down churches, no singing in church, shut down schools, you could only open if you're a big company, a big box store, but if you're a mom and pop, it's very difficult to open. What we're trying to figure out is, and I lived in New Jersey for 4 years. I have a lot of relatives that live up and around the area. Like, are the people of New Jersey just like complying and saying, hey, this is fine with us. We'll shut down for another year. We have to shut down for another year after that. We're just going to do it because, you know, supposedly that has positive health consequences? Or do you get the rumblings that people have had enough, that they feel like they're being manipulated, and there's an undercurrent going on politically?
I would say that there are definitely rumblings that are growing louder and louder every day in New Jersey, but not only New Jersey, around the country. Yeah. I think at first, when this first came about, myself included, I can say, I think that a lot of us were really scared about what was, you know, heading our way. But very, very quickly, I think.
So you're not scared anymore?
No, not one bit. Not one bit. I'm no more scared of the coronavirus than I am of the common flu. You know, when people have to inflate death numbers to make something more scary, and to inflate case numbers like they've been caught doing, I don't think that that's something that you should fear. I think that's something you should start to question. But yeah, I think the rumblings are there that people are growing very, very tired. Everybody complied at first because it was for the greater good. We didn't know what we were doing, but very quickly we saw how certain politicians seized an opportunity of a public health crisis and turned it into a very, very clearly political ploy to carry out a number of objectives that they have. And I think regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, at least people that I've talked to are growing very tired of being told what they can and cannot do and being shuffled around with this constant fear-driven narrative of this impending doom that just doesn't seem to be here.
Yeah, no, that's right. I sense the same thing across the country. And by the way, when people like you are on Tucker Carlson or Laura Ingraham or Sean Hannity, it's like my evening therapy session for my soul as I consume all this news throughout the day, this panicky news of how we're all going to die. I actually think coronavirus is a serious thing. Chinese corona, it's serious. It's really serious if your health is in bad shape. But one of the ways I think that we will combat making those pools of people who are in unsafe categories, making those pools smaller, is actually getting your health back. Maybe it's stopping smoking, maybe it's eating more healthy, maybe it's dropping weight, maybe it's going to a gym. So what I find the most ironic thing about what they have done to try to persecute you and shut down your gym is what you're offering people who are a little nervous, quite honestly, especially if they're in a category of because of their weight or their health status. You're offering them a way to get out of that category into a healthy category, which besides other medical and pharmaceutical therapies could be the number one thing that helps them from getting sick.
Absolutely. It's been laughable what these politicians think public health is. All of a sudden public health has turned into this one-dimensional entity that starts and ends with coronavirus. And it's this collectivist mindset that I think is not only not public health, but I think it's actually the adverse of public health. You can't just have a one-dimensional plan of public health where it's shelter in place, don't touch anything, disinfect everything, be afraid, don't talk to people, don't get close to people, don't socialize, sit down and wait for a virus, and that's it. That is not public health. Public health starts at the individual level, and if government really is interested in public health, then they need to start educating people about what that looks like. They need to start advocating for people to go to the gym. They need to start advocating people to be active and be healthy. Your immune system does not work in a bubble. The way that your immune system functions is that it interacts with the world and it learns from it. Every time you come in contact with something, it's like a software update for your immune system. You can't just hide from stuff. That is extremely detrimental to your immune system. And then you couple in the ideas of isolation. That's not good for anybody long term, even an introvert. People need to interact. We are social creatures. Our minds thrive off of that. Yep. And there is a very strong connection between the mind and the body. And if the mind is unhealthy, then the body will follow. And we've been sort of the gym industry, especially, is like it has been portrayed as like a bunch of meatheads who just want to lift weight. And we're actually putting out a commercial. We've interviewed people in the gym, and we're going to be putting out a commercial on national television to expose the hypocrisy of all this, where we interview people, and you're going to find some really interesting answers as to why the gym is essential for people. We have people who come into our gym. We have two-time war vets who have been injured, Purple Heart recipients who have major issues with PTSD. And the Veterans Association only wants to give them medication and this and that. Right. But this is their therapy in a lot of cases. And there's a million cases like that.
What about medical professionals? My guess is you have doctors and nurses, PTs, and others that are members of your gym as well.
Absolutely. We have a wide range. We have a ton of nurses, and these nurses are working every day in a super high stress environment. And this is a place where they come at the end of the day to disconnect and to feel better. We have a lot of police officers. We're right next to Camden. It's not an easy job to be a cop in Camden. They see a lot, they do a lot, they have to deal with a lot, and a lot of times the only other option for them is to go home and hit the bottle. But instead they come here.
Right.
They come here and they get to escape the stress of their work. And you can't tell me that that's not healthy. These people are not at risk, especially in a facility that's well regulated. And it's just the whole concept of public health has become laughable. I'm no doctor.
Let me just say, as I've been talking to you, I'm being a really good host, and I'm looking at the camera. And I all of a sudden just realized what your hat says, because I'm really slow. I guess I'm mentally very slow. Where does one get a great hat like that? Because that summarizes this American moment we're in.
This is a company. It's called Lions Not Sheep. It is owned by my good friend Sean Whalen. So if you just type in Lions Not Sheep on Google, or if you go on over to Instagram and follow Sean Whalen, you can find the link to his gear. I've got his shirt on and everything. His shirt says "Free Man, Lions Not Sheep." So it's become kind of my wardrobe these days.
That's awesome. So is the goal to be a lion and not a sheep?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Good, because that's kind of how I feel too. Now, maybe I'm not like that in the gym, but I do feel like this is a moment where a lot of our fellow citizens, they're worried, and sometimes that worry can get the best of you as you isolate, and you feel like you're doing something good for the country as you isolate. And to each his or her own. If that's how you feel like it's the best way to weather this virus, then you should have the right to do that. But if you feel like you want to get out there and safely be with people, get your health back, you shouldn't be shamed for doing that. And that really isn't the characteristics of a lion, but within the context of where we are, it actually is just actually getting out of your house because you choose to, and safely interacting with other people in the neighborhood, in the community, getting your health back, going back to work. We need more people to feel confident that if that's what they want to do, they can do it safely.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It is not government's job to regulate our health. Government's first and ultimate job is to protect our rights, and they have failed miserably at that throughout this coronavirus pandemic or situation, whatever you want to call it. And on top of that, they've failed to protect our health too. At the most vulnerable population in the United States is the population of people in long-term care facilities. And that's 2.1 million people. So that's senior centers and other long-term care facilities for people who cannot care for themselves. 2.1 million people, and that's 0.06% of our population. I'm sorry, 0.6% of our population. That small, tiny demographic is responsible for over 50% of the deaths that we've had in this country. And that is abhorrent. That is a massive failure, because the people that are supposed to be protected are at most risk, at the highest risk. And it's because of the policies of certain governors who have done this.
Yeah, I can think of 4 governors. I can think of your governor, 5. I can think of your governor, and obviously the governor of New York are the first 2 that come to mind. Obviously the governor of California. It's all about blaming Trump. But as you know, we have a federal system where states have a big role to play. And a lot of these socialist governors in these blue states actually harmed people's health. You can even take the next step and say their policies actually resulted in a lot of death, which is why people like Janice Dean are out there very bravely trying to hold them to account for these policies. And Ian, I just want you to know that I believe our CPAC community is behind you. I think you're speaking for them. I think your story is inspirational. It's exactly what we need to hear. What you do for a living professionally is going to help people weather this virus, especially if there are people that have to get their health back. And I just want to thank you for being with us on CPAC Live today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm more than happy to come back anytime. It was a pleasure.
And tell your buddy I'm getting a hat. And we're going to be right back with Congressman Mike Gallagher from Wisconsin after this video on the threat of the communist government in China.
They didn't even respect us. They were taking out $500 billion a year. We had a trade imbalance. We had a deficit of more than $500 billion with a B dollars a year. Can you believe that? Who the hell can sustain? Who wants to even talk about that? So we started charging tariffs. They hit our farmers. I gave the farmers everything that they took out, and the money came from China because it came out of the tariffs, and we had a lot of money left over. A long, complicated story, but not really complicated. No other president ever thought of it. And now the farmers love me, and we ended up making a great deal.
And we're now joined on CPAC Live by Representative Mike Gallagher, a Republican from Wisconsin who has an American Conservative Union lifetime rating of 87%. He's doing the right things every day in Congress, and we need that more than ever. Actually, Nancy Pelosi doesn't even really like Congress to come together much anymore. And the one thing we're really sure of is Congressman Gallagher is not going to ever give Nancy Pelosi his proxy, which is another kind of gross policy that she's come up with. Congressman Gallagher, thanks for being with us on CPAC Live.
It's good to be with you. Yeah, it was disheartening to have Nancy Pelosi declare Congress a non-essential entity in the midst of this pandemic.
Yeah, but she still thinks she wants to collect her salary. I don't really kind of get how that works. It's a strange thing.
It's the ultimate politician evolution. You get paid for doing nothing.
Hey, let's start by just giving us a Wisconsin update. In the state of Maryland, the governor had to intercede as it looked like some of these county political government organizations and office holders were going to literally force private schools to close. What's the status of what's open and what's closed in Wisconsin? And what's the general tenor of the people of Wisconsin vis-a-vis the shutdowns that have occurred?
Well, the thing we're dealing with right now is this sort of last-second mask mandate that our governor imposed without really getting buy-in from the local governments. And it's created a lot of confusion for businesses that really were on track to reopening, that were trying to implement things like social distancing, enhanced investments in PPE, and just sort of basic mix of telework and physical work. Now it's created a lot of confusion. So I would say we were really on the track to reopening. Our hospital systems feel increasingly confident about their ability to weather even a surge of positive cases. And while cases have gone up, the key metric of hospitalization combined with deaths is not alarming right now. And I just would say what we've learned over the last few months is that there aren't enough federal dollars that we could print in DC that could cover the cost of staying shut down. And so I'm really worried that our governor is going to be pressured by the teachers unions into a blanket closure of schools in the fall, which will just be devastating, not only economically, but for those kids who will just fall further and further behind.
The liberals tell us, and really not just the liberals, but the healthcare professionals tell us, including public health professionals, tell us a kid should only be on a screen for short periods of time and accumulatively for not very long each day. Yet many of them are calling for kids to be online 8 hours a day with schooling, because by the time you do schooling, maybe an extracurricular activity online, and then you have to do the homework to prepare for school, the amount of screen time for these kids is off the charts. And every study says that is terrible for the development of their brains.
It's interesting you bring that up. My wife and I just had our first kid 6 weeks ago, a little baby girl, and we talk about this.
If you need advice, just call me. I got more stories for you.
We need all the advice we can get, because one of the things we talk with everybody about is just the challenge of parenting in the digital age, and how do you limit screen intake and things like that. And, I'm all for distance learning, particularly when you get to higher education and technical colleges and things like that. But the fact is, in K through 12, particularly K through 6, there are severe limits to what you can accomplish via distance learning, via online education. And as you note, there are significant negative externalities. So we have to find a way to open our schools. The other thing I'd say, Matt, about Wisconsin is, if you remember, we had an April primary, and the narrative, because our governor at the last second, after admitting he didn't have the authority to delay the election, decided he was going to try to delay the election. We didn't do that. The legislature overruled him. But the narrative across the country, from the media, from Stacey Abrams, was Wisconsin was effectively killing people because it was having an election. Well, the CDC yesterday just confirmed there was no spike in cases related to the election. And the fact is, going into November, we can't do all mail voting. We have to give people the ability to vote in person.
That's right.
We can do it safely, and we just can't have people attack the integrity of our election process.
Yeah, and what's ironic about these states like the state of New York, which literally just certified the winners of their primary election 42 days ago or so. The great irony is that they sent out everybody a ballot that they could return in the mail, postage paid. That means it didn't need to have a postmark. So one of the reasons why it took 42 days is a lot of people can vote even after Election Day. Now, I like the fact that more people vote. You like the fact that more people vote. I hate the idea of Democratic election officials in these big cities knowing exactly what the delta is in some of these key races and figuring out what the difference needs to be made up. I think that's a recipe for bad people breaking the law and getting large amounts of ballots back into the system. Now, the reason why it's particularly problematic is because of the California example of this ballot harvesting, where a third party can come between you, your ballot, whether it's filled in or not filled in, and that third party can turn it in. Once again, that's a recipe for disaster. Did you see any, when you read about these cases across the country, what I'm saying, I'm not being paranoid in the fact that this could result in more voter fraud. And by the way, people get convicted of voter fraud every single election.
100%. I was going crazy on Sunday when I watched Meet the Press, and Chuck Todd uncritically asserted that there was no evidence that mail-in voting leads to voter fraud. In the midst of the debacle we're seeing in New York, I believe we had a blue ribbon commission on this issue that involved Jimmy Carter and some other former presidents that found significant voter fraud. The fact is, at least in our state, I mean, I think we have a pretty common sense system where absentee voting is very easy if you are a legal voter and you meet the residency requirements. In-person voting is also very accessible and easy earlier than just the day of the election. And of course, we always have to maintain that ability to vote on the day of the election. And so in Wisconsin, we actually make it very easy to vote, but our goal is to make it difficult, if not impossible, to cheat. And that should be the common sense standard.
That's right. And I love it when they say, well, voter fraud, didn't change the outcome. It was only a couple of percent. It's like, you know what? Any voter fraud is terrible. And we all know we're only going to be able to capture some of it because you literally have to have an election official accompany each ballot to be confident to know the exact numbers. So it's always at play in all these elections. And that's why so many people have been convicted. Now, we're going to be in Wisconsin on August 14th. You're going to join us. We're going to be in Green Bay. And I want to remind everybody, as I said at the top of the show, go to our website at conservative.org. You can look at all the great past episodes of CPAC Live, but more specifically, you can sign up to be with us in Wisconsin. By the way, you don't have to, unlike voting, you don't have to live in Wisconsin to come to CPAC Wisconsin. You can fly in, you can drive in. We're going to be at this great car museum. It's going to be a lot of fun. I think we all want to see each other. So tell us a little bit, Congressman, what you plan on telling the people that assemble at CPAC Wisconsin and what your message is these days.
You know, increasingly, I've become convinced that almost every 2 years and certainly every 4 years, politicians love to come to the American people and say, this is the most important election of our lifetime. This is the most important election of our lifetime. Certainly, I felt that way in 2016, but I hesitate to say that now just because it's become such a sort of political cliche, right?
But people throw it out.
I do think that if not the most important election of our lifetime, this is the most fundamental or elemental. And by that, I mean, we're having to go back and relitigate certain things like freedom of speech, respect for rule of law, respect for property rights, respect for the institution of the family that we assumed in prior generations all Americans generally agreed upon, and we were going to fight about other things like the size of government, the nature of how we deliver healthcare, the size of the military. Well, this election is about those most basic fundamental things, and I think it's also about whether you believe America is a fundamentally evil and racist country, or whether you believe, as I do, as President Trump does, that America is a good country, a force for good in this world, and indeed the greatest country in history. So I think the stakes are high, and we're seeing a clear contrast right now. And as someone who works a lot on national security, certainly there's a whole host of issues that I just don't want us to see us go back to the days of Obama and Biden, really surrendering American strength and watching our adversaries rise around the world.
So, I often say that CPAC is like a rock concert without the sex and the drugs and the rock and roll. But we have a lot of kids who show up, a lot of students. We are going to have a CPAC tour T-shirt, and the theme is the same theme we had at our most recent national CPAC, which is America versus socialism. So what you're saying really rings true to me too, as well, which is, I even have friends that aren't particularly fond of President Trump. I think he's doing a great job. I like him personally. Mercy and I have loved the fact that we've been able to help him. But some people don't like him. They don't cotton to him. This is more than about Donald Trump. It's about the idea of America. And it's more than about, whether or not Joe Biden is senile and a radical and doesn't have his fastball anymore, which he does not have. It's about socialism and who will run his administration were he to win. Do you think in Wisconsin, which is one of these incredibly important states, that even people who might not like everything about Donald Trump or didn't vote for him last time can now see, after what's happened in Minneapolis and now in all these cities across the country, this radicalism, unfortunately, that comes out of a lot of colleges, including, Madison and some of these places, that has indoctrinated too many of our kids. Do you think that has grown this silent majority of people that know that this is rotten and wrong, what they're doing to America, and they're going to vote for people like you and Donald Trump, but they're just not going to talk very loudly about it?
I can only speak based on my own experience, but I'm certainly seeing that phenomenon play out in my own family, extended family in some cases, in a lot of people that I'm friends with in Northeast Wisconsin that don't share my sort of conservative convictions. I just think there's a reaction to the increasing illiberal nature of the left and this attempt to cancel any disagreement and this attempt to silence any dissent. It actually goes beyond that, I think. The second most popular sign that I'm seeing at these BLM rallies is one that says, silence is violence. And if you think about that, that's actually a very dangerous sort of totalitarian idea, right? It's not just, that you have to agree with the orthodoxy on the left. It's that you don't even have the option not to care, right? You have to bend the knee to whatever the cause is at that time. And really, I just would extend your framing of America versus socialism to, on the geopolitical level, it's America and the free world versus the commies and the fascists. I mean, my belief is that in communist China, we have an existential threat, unlike anything we faced since the late 40s and early 50s with the Soviet Union. And our victory in what I would call a new Cold War is by no means guaranteed. And it's particularly fragile if we don't have a consensus in this country on the basic idea that we deserve to win, that we are the good guys and the communists in China are the bad guys.
So a way to think about it, it's America versus socialism, but it's also that great American flag versus the hammer and the sickle. And that hammer and the sickle has taken very too many vicious forms, always failed, but always wreaked havoc. And in the specific question of China, Donald Trump came to town in only the way he could have and trampled over the carefully plotted out strategy of the last 50 years on how to approach the communist government of China. Your reaction to his new policies, was this the right way to do it, or should we have just kind of like tinkered with the old way?
This was absolutely the right way to do it. And I actually think this is the untold story of the last 4 years. And by that, I mean, even Trump's loudest critics aren't actually disputing the premise of his national security strategy, which is that China is the pacing threat. We need to organize our defense, our diplomacy, our economic policies around that idea. And I think the coronavirus crisis, where you've had Chinese diplomats going around on Twitter and Facebook spreading conspiracy theories, where you've had them threatening to cut off the export of advanced pharmaceutical ingredients to exploit the crisis, has really woken a lot of people up, not just in America, but in Europe, right? We've had the United Kingdom reverse a critical decision as it relates to not allowing Chinese companies to compete for the future of their 5G internet infrastructure.
Great decision. Great
Yeah,
decision.
100%. And that is credit to the hard-nosed diplomacy of many in the Trump administration. I mean, we've really sort of seen, I can't remember a time when you've had major administration officials from the National Security Advisor to Attorney General Barr to the director of the FBI to Mike Pompeo all do speeches on, different versions of the same theme, pushing back against communist China. And so I actually think we're witnessing the biggest reorientation of U.S. foreign policy since the end of the old Cold War. And it's something that the president and his advisors deserve enormous credit for.
But your concern is that the communists in China and the state-owned enterprises, which, by the way, do many pernicious things. For instance, they've been able to get some of this coronavirus aid money, this China coronavirus aid money, and these state-owned enterprises in China have been able to get their hands on some of that money because they make buses and they make trains, and some of our big cities have contracted with them. So they look for every way to kind of pervert our system and actually take our taxpayer dollars to compete with other manufacturers. But you're also concerned that China continues to kind of like take the elite, whether they be CEOs or journalists. We've seen China's infiltration of and coordination with McKinsey Consulting and try to get more American companies to come over to China. Why do they continue to be effective when clearly they're so against what America stands for?
Well, the short answer is because they're willing to pay people a lot of money, and people, elites in the U.S. and in the U.K. and around the world, are willing to sell their souls for the sake of money.
By the way, Hunter Biden came back with a plane load of cash. That doesn't just happen.
It doesn't just happen, and we've just seen elite capture, certainly on Wall Street in the last 2 decades by China. I don't know if you saw it when a former senator and former ambassador to China, Max Baucus, last month went on Chinese state television and he compared Trump to Hitler. He, called Republicans, as summoning the ghosts of McCarthyism. He was effectively parroting Chinese Communist Party talking points on their state television. And that was just the most egregious example of the many ways in which China is using the swamp against us. Last year, Huawei hired Samir Jain, who served as the National Security Council Senior Director for Cybersecurity Policy in the Obama administration. So Obama's highest level advisor on cybersecurity, presumably still with a government clearance, was on the payroll of a CCP-controlled telecommunications company. I sent a letter to the director of the FBI just asking, does he still have a clearance? And I still haven't received an answer on that just basic fact. And so we're slowly waking up to the extent of Chinese infiltration of our democracy. But I think the scandal of all of it is that it's not really illegal. It's corrupt, but it's not illegal. We have very weak foreign influence laws, lobbying disclosure agreements, and things like that. And so it's creating a mess in D.C.
Well, Mike Gallagher, we appreciate everything you do in Congress. We're going to enjoy being out there with you in Wisconsin for CPAC Wisconsin. We want everybody to sign up at our website. Come join us. We're obviously going to follow all the health guidelines for the event, but we are going to have an election in November, whether folks like it or not. And I like it. And I think we're going to do a lot better than what these national polls are saying. It's great to hear, Mike, that the people of Wisconsin are responding to Donald Trump's policies and what Republicans are trying to get done in Congress. Now, yesterday, my wife, I think, was treated very rudely in an interview on CNN with Breonna Keeler. I tweeted out that I thought it almost looked like Breonna Keeler was the guest and my calm wife was the host. And I asked when Breonna Keeler had actually become a spokesperson for Joe Biden, because it sure sounded like she was a spokesperson for Joe Biden. We're going to show you an extended clip of that interview to end the show. And I want to thank Congressman Gallagher for being with us again.
Thank you.
November 3rd.
Mercedes,
Yes or no?
you're saying that voter fraud is a thing, and I'm telling you that it's not, and you're muddying the
Okay,
waters.
let's be
And I
clear.
also wonder, don't you worry that that's going to actually hurt you? I mean, isn't that to the point why the president has said when it comes? Okay,
Issues may have left thousands
Mercedes,
of votes
I'm asking.
I'm just going.
Mercedes,
I can go. In
Mercedes,
fact, we can go have
this is like
cocktail and
so.
go down.
This is just
Yeah.
pointless. Okay, this is pointless. I get it. You're just saying a bunch of crap. Okay, you're saying a bunch of crap.
Can I tell you what? No. Let me
We're
tell you.
talking
because
about
you have
no. We're talking about voting in a pandemic.
And
We're
then
talking.
all of a sudden,
Okay.
you don't let them have a conversation with them.
We're talking about voting in a pandemic, okay? We're talking about people trying to. Can you listen, Mercedes? I need you to listen to me, okay? Let's focus and have a serious conversation here.